Minister, as you are aware, the Mercosur trade deal is bad for Irish agriculture, is very bad for European consumers, and indeed is bad for the global environment. And it's a deal that has been spoken about for a long time now. The Mercosur trade deal has been negotiated between the EU and the Mercosur countries in Latin America for over 25 years. And those negotiations are now over. There's no more negotiations of this deal. The deal is the deal. It's done, or so we are told. And it's going to be voted on in the EU Council meeting in the next few weeks. The final EU-Mercosur Trade Agreement is widely criticised for harming Irish and EU farmers, undermining climate goals, potentially affecting public health and bypassing democratic scrutiny. This is a bad deal for Ireland and a bad deal for the EU. The threat to Irish agriculture is very real indeed, especially for our suckler and beef industry, and indeed for our poultry sector, which is very important and under huge pressure at the moment, as you know, Minister, with the bird flu pandemic sweeping across the country, potentially causing huge harm. I am sure you are aware that this deal is bad for Ireland, as it has been reported over the years. As currently stands, Mercosur beef is already being imported into the EU. In total, there are around 105,000 tonnes of beef and 68,000 tonnes of frozen beef being imported into the EU annually. 58,000 tonnes of this beef has a tariff at the moment of 20% on it, under the Hilton quota, and the rest has a tariff of between 40% and 50%. So you can imagine how cheaply Mercosur countries are producing this substandard beef when they can make profits like this while selling beef at a 40% to 50% tariff. Now, under the Mercosur deal, there are 58,000 tonnes of it will be zero tariff, and a further 99,000 tonnes will be at 7.5% tariff. And anything over that will be back up to the 40% to 50%. So there's actually no limit on the amount of beef that can come from Brazil into the European Union. There simply is a limit on what level of it will be tariff-free or low-tariffed. That's what this deal is doing. You and I are aware of the issues in South America beef, particularly. Animal welfare standards are considerably poorer compared to Ireland and the EU, and there is no traceability of cattle and no tagging of animals at all. Ireland and the EU have the highest levels of animal welfare and food security standards in the world, and this agreement weakens the EU food safety checks and audits and auditing powers, which allow imports produced with banned pesticides, hormones and antibiotics. This increases the risk of unsafe agricultural products entering the EU market. This deal is disastrous for the environment. It is seen as incompatible with the EU Paris Agreement commitments. It is expected to increase exports of deforestation-linked products like beef and soya, driving Amazon destruction and raising greenhouse gas emissions. The EU attempt to appease member states who are opposed to this deal by proposing safeguards and so-called a handbrake clause does nothing to protect Irish or EU farmers. There has to be a decline of 10% in the EU market price in order to trigger the safeguards, and there is a high legal threshold requiring proof that the decline in price is as a consequence or a result of Mercosur imports. This safeguard is not preventative. It addresses harm only after the cause and does not fix the structural issues like unequal production standards and environmental costs. If this deal is ratified, it will result in the loss of jobs in the Irish agriculture, and we will see further decline in the Irish suckler industry, which is already under huge strain. We have already seen declining numbers in the suckler herd, particularly in the North West and along the western seaboard. We are trying to promote generational renewal in Irish agriculture, but there is no point in incentivising young farmers to take over the farm on one hand and pulling the rug out from under them on the other by supporting the Mercosur trade deal. Irish farmers cannot compete with cheap beef from South America that is of a substandard and has no traceability regulations. Poor animal welfare standards produced at the cost of the environment. Irish farmers cannot be sacrificed for German cars to be sold in South America. Government has neglected their responsibility when it comes to defending Irish farmers and have sat back and have a wait-and-see attitude approach to the Mercosur trade deal. Their response has always been that they are opposed to the deal in its current form. Well, negotiating is over. The deal is not going to change, and in the next 4 weeks this government must stand up for Irish farms and reject the Mercosur trade deal. This deal can only be stopped if the government engages with like-minded member states and forms a blocking minority at EU Council level.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Newsom-Drennan. First, I want to begin by expressing my deep condolence to the family of the Waterford man who tragically lost his life in a farming incident this week. It is a stark reminder that farming remains one of the most dangerous occupations in Ireland. And I'd like to welcome the people in the gallery that represent different farming organisations. You're welcome. I want to commend my colleague Martin Kenny and the wider Sinn Féin team for their work on this motion. Most importantly, I commend them for listening to the deep concerns of our farming community and for bringing their voices, their concerns, their worries for the future of rural communities here into this stall. Let us be clear, Sinn Féin will ensure that their voice is always heard in this chamber and not left outside the gates of Leinster House. Minister, Mercosur is not some abstract trade policy. Mercosur is a direct attack on Irish agriculture, on our family farmers and on our rural communities. Farms like my own in South Kilkenny and like yours in Kildare, farms that have been passed down from one generation to the next. Minister, just like you, my children are growing up on a suckler farm, like so many sons and daughters across Ireland who have grown up farming and working the land. It is so much more than a job, it's a way of life. It is a passion that has ensured our farmers continue to reach higher and higher standards. I want a future where our sons and daughters on farms across Ireland can make a decent living while producing highest quality of food. And I give them our word. We will damn well fight for that future. We should be under no illusion Mercosur will create a race to the bottom. For the wider public, the changes will be subdued. 100% Irish beef will start disappearing from menus. Instead, people across Ireland will be served beef that is not traceable. It's not grass-fed, but instead reared indoors on banned growth hormones and genetically modified feeds. It will devastate the rainforest. Hundreds of thousands of acres are being cleared in South America right now, specifically to produce more of this cheap beef for the EU market. This undermines everything we stand for. Food produced in Ireland and the EU is held to the highest of standards. Mercosur's countries couldn't be further from our high standards. Their practices would be considered a public health risk if done here in the EU. This deal imports their lowest standards and puts the public at risk. So let's be clear, Mercosur is a bad deal for Irish farmers, a bad deal for public health, and it must be rejected. Minister, supporting Mercosur will be a betrayal of the Irish farming of rural communities. It would be selling out those who stood with you so often, just so that German businessmen can make millions more selling cars and chemicals to South America. Minister, that will be your legacy as Minister for Agriculture if a firm stand is not taken now. Now you have a clear choice here. Stand with ordinary people and stop Ireland from being sold out for cheap imports and protect Irish agriculture by backing this motion.
Deputy Conor McGuinness.
Minister, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael sold out the Irish fishing industry and is set now to sell out Irish agriculture. Your government now faces a very simple but very serious choice. Will you stand with Irish farmers, rural communities and our domestic food sector, or will you allow the Mercosur trade deal to sell them out? Much has been said by the government over the last year in the run into the general election as well about opposing Mercosur, but now the real test is upon you. So let's call Mercosur what it is. It's a bad deal for our beef and suckler farmers, it's a bad deal for the environment, it's a bad deal for the world, and it is a bad deal for Ireland. And every farming organisation, I want to welcome those in the public gallery here from the ICSA and from the IFA and other organisations, every single farming organisation in this country opposes Mercosur. Every farmer who depends on a fair price, strong standards and a level playing field knows exactly what this agreement will mean. The EU will allow 99,000 tonnes of beef and 180,000 tonnes of poultry to flood into the European market, much of it produced under standards that would be illegal here. Irish farmers meet the highest levels of traceability, animal welfare and environmental regulation anywhere in the world. In the Mercosur countries, there is no equivalent system, there are no checks, there are no transparency and no balance. Cattle aren't even tagged in many cases. Hormones, pesticides and antibiotics that are banned here, that are illegal to use in the European Union, are routinely used in production in Mercosur countries. And yet this government would allow that product to compete directly with Irish beef. It's not just unfair, it's a threat to public health and to food security. And we're told to trust the so-called safeguard clause, but this is nothing more than a political smokescreen. It will not protect Irish farm incomes and will not reverse the structural damage this agreement will cause. Environmentally, the consequences are devastating. As already been mentioned, the impact on the Amazon at a time of runaway climate change can't be overstated. So tonight, Sinn Féin are asking this House to send a clear, united message that Ireland says no to Mercosur. We're asking you, Minister, and your government to send a clear message to the European Union, to the Council and the Commission that we oppose Mercosur and that the Irish state will not accept it as a deal. We're asking you to stop hiding now behind excuses, to stand up, to grow a backbone, to stand up for our farming, our farmers, our family farmers and rural communities, and to work with those European states who also are opposed to this when we come to the Council meeting in December. So, last Ceann Comhairle, the Government can still choose to defend Irish agriculture. It's not too late to defend Irish standards and defend Irish jobs. So support this motion, stand with farmers and reject Mercosur.
Deputy Daly.
Mercosur is a rotten deal for people and for the planet, and it must be rejected. The government of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the regional independents, including the Healy-Rae brothers, are selling out Ireland, abandoning our farmers, and signing a blank cheque for environmental degradation and destruction the world over. Because no doubt this is just the beginning, and it will put the farm families out of business. They are rolling out the red carpet for imports, packed with banned pesticides, hormones and antibiotics, and gambling with our agriculture, our public health and the future of the planet. It's a fundamental threat to our sovereignty. So how can it be I refuse to accept that the largest free trade agreement in history can go ahead without the approval of national parliaments? It's undemocratic and it's a betrayal of the Irish people. But the government must be honest. This Mercosur deal is fundamentally incompatible with climate science. It exposes the hypocrisy of the government, von der Leyen and the Commission in allowing 99,000 of untraceable South American beef and 180 tonnes of poultry into the EU market at reduced tariffs. These imports are not subject to the same standards. They fall far short of the high bar we expect from Irish farmers who produce high-quality food for EU citizens and at the same time providing public goods. This is all to be sacrificed for the benefit of global corporations in the automotive and pharma sector, to sell cars, to sell insurance and to sell wine. It is signing up to a deal which will decimate the Earth's lungs, and it will reward production linked to the deforestation of the Amazon and the Cerrado Nevada, two of the most critical ecosystems on our planet. So I ask the government, including the Healy-Rae brothers, do you stand with family farmers and indigenous people with the Amazon and the shared future of the planet? Do you believe in democracy, or do you sell out for corporate greed? It's your moment of choice. Which side are you on?
Deputy Carthy.
Agus a Cahirlock, I have often said that our farmers deserve three things: fair prices, a fair cap and fair play. And in all three, we've had successive governments failing. On prices, we still have the diktats coming from the factories and the retailers, and we've never got a stranglehold on the conglomerate interests that are controlling the prices that are received. On cap, we now have a situation where farmers are receiving less payments but being asked to do more and more every single year. And on fair play, what do we mean by that? The first thing I mean by that is a recognition that the farmers in the gallery here tonight, and the farmers the length and breadth of this country, produce food to the highest standards and with the highest level of regulations in the world. Nowhere outside of the European Union matches the controls that are on farmers in respect of the climate, in respect of environment, in respect of animal welfare, in respect of biodiversity. And yet, while expected to meet all of those obligations, they're also expected to compete with states and with farmers who don't have to adhere to the same level of regulation. That's unfair, Cahirlock. And not only are they expected to compete, we're now being faced with a trade deal that wants to tip the balance in favour of those farming organisations that don't adhere to the same regulations. I have to say, Minister, the approach by successive governments on this matter has been very, very cynical. I've heard ministers from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael over the past decade and a half indicating that they oppose the Mercosur deal. They never say that actually the only reason Mercosur is on the table at all is because an Irish government signed up to a negotiating mandate and permitted the European Commission to open negotiations when they could have said stop when there was a unanimity principle in place. They don't say that there were countless occasions over the past decade that the Irish government could have stopped in its track the Mercosur negotiations and failed to do so. And they don't say now, loud and clear, so that the European Commission can hear, that Ireland will not accept a lunacy whereby in this House we have people talking about cutting herds in Ireland and in Europe, and at the same time importing hundreds of thousands of beef from the far end of the world and literally mowing down rainforests in order to produce that beef. The lunacy has to stop now, Minister. We need very clear, unequivocal language that the European Commission hears. We, the Irish people, will not accept the Mercosur trade deal.
Thank you, Las Cathaoirleach. Now, Minister, we've had months and months of hand-wringing and vague objections to the agreement in its current form. And the fact is that the negotiations are finished, the deal is done, and now you must decide whether you are for it or against it. From an enterprise, tourism and employment perspective, I can see exactly what's at stake here. Irish agriculture underpins tens of thousands of rural jobs, small businesses, agri-tourism ventures, transport, food processing and hospitality. And when you undermine the family farm, you undermine the entire rural economy. The deal will flood the EU market with 99,000 tonnes of beef and 180,000 tonnes of poultry. Irish farmers are required to meet the highest animal welfare, traceability and environmental standards in the world. Now they will be forced to compete with cheaper substandard imports produced with hormones and chemicals banned here for decades. The European Commission's own audit in 2024 confirmed that Brazil cannot guarantee hormone-free beef, yet under Mercosur exporters can self-certify, and this is absolutely reckless. Now, let's be clear, this isn't just an attack on Irish farmers, it's an attack on our climate commitments, on Indigenous peoples in South America whose lands are taken for cattle ranching, and on a global fight against deforestation in the Amazon. Government ministers say that they oppose the deal in its current form, but that line is now meaningless. The deal on the table is the deal. There's no more negotiating. The only question is whether Ireland would vote for it or against it. Farmers know this. The IFA, the ICSA, the INHFA know this. Every farming organisation in the country is opposed to this. The so-called emergency brake is not worth the paper it's written on. It's temporary, it's weak, and it's entirely inadequate to prevent job losses, market distortion, or the slow death of the family farm. There's much more I could say, Minister, but I need to hand over to my colleague. But, Minister, you need to stop dithering. You need to reject this agreement publicly and to work with like-minded states to build a blocking minority to this disastrous deal.
Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin.
All of my life in politics, I've talked to farming families who are asked to adhere to the highest standards possible, and that's why we have a world-class produce when we talk about Irish beef, grass-fed beef, the pride of the world, the highest exporters in the European Union. But our farmers had been asked to bend backwards again and again to comply with environmental standards. They've been held up as a scapegoat around climate change again and again and again. That's what they've had to put up with. It is absolutely galling and sickening, therefore, to have the same European Commission that demanded the highest standards possible in the world for our produce, to then have a produce at a whole different scale competing with us. This is absolute madness. So, Minister, this motion, and I commend Deputy Kenny and Deputy Natasha here in terms of bringing these forward. I want to thank all of the farming organisations who are in the public gallery tonight. And what they're standing up for is their communities. And they're saying to you, Minister, do not take them for granted. Do not take their support for granted. And they're putting it up to you to now make it clear, to stand up to the hypocrisy and the double standards, to say that everything that you've said as a European Commission in terms of all of the agricultural policies now are held to scrutiny like never before, and that you build support across Europe to stop this, to put an end to this, to say that we have standards in Europe that if you want to come into this market and compete, you must reach those standards too. It couldn't be more simple. It really is straightforward. So over to you now, Minister. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Minister, what you call agricultural sensitivities we see as a real threat to Irish agriculture and to Irish farm families the length and breadth of our state. And I have to say it's a real kick in the teeth to farmers who have to bend over backwards and work so hard to meet regulation after regulation, to meet a bar that is set so high, and they meet it as high as it's set, and then to see the real possibility of tens of thousands of tonnes of beef coming in to the EU, totally unregulated. I grew up on a beef and suckler farm. I've lived on it my entire life, and we recently had our Board BIA inspection and audit. And it's important to recognise the level and the amount of work that goes into that. Every receipt for every bag of mail, every receipt for every medicine purchased, every detail in relation to every medicine for every animal, when, quantity, batch numbers for feed, every single detail that goes into the work that farmers have to do day in, day out to make sure that they meet the standards and that they meet their obligations in terms of traceability. Every movement of every animal, and if you have a cat on your farm, then that cat has to have had a tablet. That is the level and the standard that Irish farmers and their families are held to when we face our audits and our inspections. So the nub of the issue here is that Irish farmers work extremely hard. They have to do what they do. For a lot of them, it's a love of the land and it's a love of the farm and it's a family and it's generations. It's so much more than profit, which many farmers don't make to begin with. And what we've heard here tonight will not fill them with confidence. You are not, as the Minister for Agriculture in Ireland, in a position to say that you reject and that you oppose Mercosur. You haven't said that, and I don't think that will fill farmers with faith in relation to this.
Deputy McGettigan.
Minister, Mercosur will allow the cheap imports of beef, poultry, pork, sugar and biofuels with lower standards than ours. Our Food Safety Authority was established after several high-profile outbreaks and deaths from foodborne illnesses, and its commitment since to openness and transparency has helped us as consumers to look for and demand healthier food. Knowing where our food comes from, production methods and its journey to our tables allow us to make decisions around quality, freshness, nutrition, environmental sustainability, but more importantly, supporting local farmers and producers. This deal is a threat to public health. They don't even tag cattle, and they use hormones and antibiotics banned here. As a country, we worked hard to get to the high standards. Our farmers worked hard in this. Now, where will all that hard work go, and where will we stand if we are going to allow cheap imports from Mercosur countries with lower standards? Our family farms are already struggling as it is, and this deal will be so bad for farmers and for healthier food. When it comes to deforestation, governments only agree to try to prevent deforestation 6 years from now. 6 years will bring us to the end of 2031. And yet at COP26 Climate Change Summit, our Taoiseach, along with more than 100 governments, signed a pledge promising to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. So where does that pledge lie now? Is this going to be another broken promise? Is the lungs of our world going to continue to be decimated? How much more stored carbon is going to be released? Experts say we're at a tipping point, a point of no return. But on top of all that, this agreement would allow Mercosur countries to sue if EUDR or any future environmental or social legislation affects their exports to this EU. How can anyone think this deal will be good for farmers, for our country's health, for our climate is beyond me.
Graves.
Minister, you know that the Mercosur trade deal is bad for Ireland and Irish farmers. Before the last general election, this government was against the agreement. Now it's time to stand up against the deal. In the EU, the Sinn Féin MEPs Lynn Boyle and Kathleen Funchion are standing up for Ireland and Irish farmers. Along with our colleagues in the Left Group, they've referred the deal to the European Court of Justice. They've asked the top European Court to rule on whether the Mercosur deal is legal under EU law. This agreement is widely criticised for undermining our climate goals and bypassing democratic scrutiny. The deal would let either side demand compensation if they believe the policies of the other side has hurt them economically, even if the policy complies with all legal and trade rules. This could be exploited to further undermine EU regulations around climate, workers' rights and health standards. This agreement also puts the health of our people at risk. It will facilitate a race to the bottom in poultry and beef standards. There is no test for the antibiotics put into beef or poultry being imported from Brazil. We have to take the word of rich, big ranch farmers. This is simply not good enough. This deal will have damaging consequences for the environment. It will see further deforestation in South America. It threatens the livelihood of local indigenous farmers in Brazil. They have pleaded with Europe not to support this deal, as it will give the big ranchers and their supporters the green light to push farmers off their land to make way for the production of beef to undermine Irish and EU farmers. This must serve as a wake-up call for the government. So now it's time to make up your mind, to stand up for Ireland, to stand up for the Irish farmers against this dangerous deal and to say no to Mercosur.
Minister, Irish farmers produce some of the finest food products in the world, from our well-renowned grass-fed beef, our high-quality milk products to our tillage sector. Irish farmers are world leaders in terms of animal welfare and food production standards. The farming sector faces many threats, including generational renewal, the loss of the nitrates derogation and farm viability. However, the Mercosur trade deal represents a direct threat to the European export market, which many farm livelihoods depend on. In 2024, Irish farm product exports to EU countries reached almost €5.9 billion and accounted for 35% of all Irish food and drink exports. With Mercosur, this European export market is at risk of being flooded with cheaper, poor quality products from South American countries. And as my colleagues have said, the reality is that farmers in South American countries do not face the same strict animal welfare, traceability and environmental standards that Irish farmers do, and now we face the prospect of high-quality Irish produce being replaced by inferior products. Any government proposal to support this deal makes a mockery of its own regulations. If you are going to allow beef from countries where many cattle aren't even tagged, let alone any other form of traceability. The Minister, when he was here, said that he had concerns about the deal, but he still can't say that he is opposed to this deal or that the government will reject this deal, and that is cowardly and it is unacceptable. This is a bad deal for Irish farmers. You must not allow Irish farmers to be undercut by South American imports. You must not allow Irish farmers to be sacrificed for the sake of German car manufacturers. And you must not allow the European Union to yet again undermine Irish agriculture. So it's time for you to get off the fence, and I call on the government to protect Irish agriculture and to oppose, to reject outright this deal.
I welcome the opportunity to speak on this important and timely motion and thank Deputies Kenny and Newsom-Drennan for bringing it forward. The purpose and intent of the motion is to send a clear, unequivocal message that Ireland must stand up for its farming families and rural communities by opposing the Mercosur trade deal. This agreement is a bad deal on every front. It's a bad deal for Irish agriculture, treating our world-class standards with threatening our world-class standards with an influx of substandard imports. It's a bad deal for consumers, undermining public health, food safety and traceability. And it's a bad deal for our environment, promoting a model of production that fuels deforestation. All the main farming organisations stand united in their opposition, and they recognise the existential threat this deal poses to their livelihoods. The government's response has been dangerously lacklustre. Their wait-and-see, it'll be all right on the night approach is a dereliction of duty. Negotiations are finished, the deal is done, but it's not too late to stop it. I have to say that the comments from the Minister, and he had 10 minutes to make his contribution, and it was 10 minutes to say absolutely nothing. it was a running commentary. The government continues to examine the deal, continues to engage. It's, in his words, it's fair to say that right now it's far from clear that a blocking minority exists. Well, what about the government efforts to build a blocking minority? Hear, hear. Why doesn't the government say that they recognise and have examined this deal, not that they continue to examine it, that they oppose this deal, that they'll stand up for farmers, they'll stand up for rural communities, that they'll defend their livelihoods, and that they'll reject this deal and build that blocking minority to ensure that it doesn't pass? Gormagat.
The Mercosur deal, if it is ratified by the European Union, will sound a death knell for thousands of farmers in Ireland and across the European Union. The European Union's mission statement is to promote the well-being of its citizens by providing freedom, security and justice. I believe this deal is contrary to these principles. Freedom is democracy. Democracy is not being served here. The deliberate splitting of the deal into two takes away the majority vote, thus undermining the process of natural law. Changing the deal from an associate agreement to a partnership one is underhanded, deceitful and betrayal of the Irish farmers. The importation of 99,000 tonnes of beef and 180,000 tonnes of poultry wipes away the financial security from every family farm in Ireland and will result in huge losses of income and undermine the prospects and any ambitions of young people to continue farming into the future. The people of Ireland are not naive. They know that this imported beef and poultry will not be subject to the same high standard as the Irish produce, bringing with it a high risk of banned pesticides, hormones and antibiotics being used and entering our food chain, and the real possibility of long-term health problems down the line. This is why this deal must be scrapped. This deal is being done with one of the biggest beef barons in the world, JPS, who are now trading in the New York Stock Exchange since June this year, and coincidentally they also contributed over $5 million to the Trump presidential campaign. Over 75,000 hectares of rainforests have been cleared this year alone. Deforestation is not only destroying the Earth's natural resources of oxygen, but also trampling on the human rights of the indigenous people of that area, some paying with their lives. The farmers in my county of Wexford are bitterly opposed to this deal. They are fully supported by the Wexford IFA, including the current Deputy President Alice Doyle and Ger O'Mahony, who stated on South East Radio that farmers are totally and utterly opposed to this deal. I welcome this Sinn Féin motion and I hope it will receive full support from all the TDs in the House.
Minister, Irish agriculture, public health and environment cannot be sacrificed for the sake of Ursula von der Leyen selling more German cars in South America. Now is the time for government TDs and from Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Independents to actually stand with farmers instead of speaking out both sides of their mouth, running with the hare and pulling with the hound. We have a large community in farming community in South Wicklow and North Wexford, and they know that this deal isn't good for them. Negotiations are finished, the deal is done, so now is the time to decide if you're for it or against it. Very simple, get off the fence. The Mercosur Trade Agreement is a terrible deal for agriculture, dangerous for Irish and EU consumers and deadly for the environment. Now, Sinn Féin's motion tonight calls for cross-party support, send a very clear message that Ireland opposes this agreement. On Thursday last, I stood outside this House with all the farming organisations and have met with farmers from across Wicklow, Wexford on many occasions, and I welcome many of them here tonight, and not one of them supports this deal. Absolutely wrong on every level and sound the death knell of Irish agriculture. However, the government's response to date has been lacklustre, sit-back-and-wait approach, rather than fighting for the interests of Irish farmers and all consumers of Irish food. Now, the negotiations are finished, the deal is done, now it's time to decide, basically get off the fence. So, our beef is produced to world-class standards, yet to be forced to compete against cheap, inferior, substandard chemical beef from South America with little or no traceability. And the agreement will devastate the agriculture, accelerate the environmental destruction of the rainforest, which is basically the lungs of the earth. And all farming organisations are opposed to this, and I salute you in your strong presence here tonight. And so I'd say to the farmers of Ireland, please stop voting for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and the parties who are selling you out, for those of you who do that, because it will be the equivalent of a turkey voting for Christmas in future if we continue this. So we're all sending a united message tonight anyway that this deal must be stopped, and it's not too late because the government must do everything possible, work with other member states to use a blocking minority at the EU Council in December, because it's a terrible deal for everybody.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister,
I'd like to firstly welcome all the farming organisations here tonight. As a TD from rural Monaghan, I very much welcome you here tonight and I support you. Time and time again, Irish farming families have been tasked to rise to challenges, whether absorbing inflationary shocks within their already too meagre margins or to meet the ever-rising environmental challenges. They do exactly what is often asked of them. What they expect in return is a government that puts in place a framework that they can work within. Successive Irish governments have often failed to live up to their part of that agreement. At a time when farming families here in Ireland are bearing witness, it seems at times, to a national conversation as to whether their livelihood should be culled. This government was party to trade negotiations which would see their produce replaced with a lower quality South American alternative. Assurances offered by successive ministers were not worth the paper that they were written on, and the so-called safeguard that yielded have been welcomed or endorsed by virtually no one. This deal will see upwards on 100,000 tonnes of beef and 180,000 tonnes of poultry flood the European market and more. That produce won't be produced to the Irish standards in terms of pesticides, hormones or antibiotics. It is grossly unfair to lecture Irish producers on the environment or the animal health on the one hand, while on the other hand allowing to be undercut by those not held to the same standards. This is a bad deal for Ireland and it must be rejected. And I say to the government of Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Independents, you need to stand up against Europe and don't let Mercosur happen.
I want to thank Teach Kenny and Teach Newsom Drennan for this motion, and I want to welcome the farmers here to their Dáil here tonight. This Mercosur deal has been dubbed the cows for cars trade deal by many, who rightly believe this trade deal will overwhelmingly contribute to a climate crisis, a crisis already out of control. And I'll tell you, damn the hair that the cows for cars deal care about your programme for government. This deal is completely incompatible with our commitments to the Paris Agreement to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, a target we're already set to miss. It will significantly boost trade in goods that have a high environmental impact as well, such as soya, poultry and particularly beef, all of which contribute to widespread deforestation. Between 2001 and 2020, the Amazon rainforest lost over 54.2 million hectares, almost 90% of its forest, the size of France. And Taoiseach made a virtue out of attending COP30, taking place at the home of the Amazon rainforest, to show other leaders how seriously Ireland was taking climate action. We cannot call for climate action and biodiversity protection at COP 1 week and wave through rainforest destruction the following week, all for the sake of a pat on the head from German car manufacturers. Mercosur is going to hurt Irish farmers, beef farmers and poultry farmers. The meat that will enter the EU market will not have the same regulations as we have, meaning little or no safety standards. We need to ensure high standards across the board on food quality and maintain our binding commitments. Our solidarity must lie with Irish family farmers here at home, solidarity with the indigenous South American people defending the world's richest ecosystems, and solidarity with the generations who will inherit the consequences of their decision.
Thank you, Deputy Crone.
Mercosur is not about trade, it's about agricultural vandalism.
First of all, before I finish, I want to thank all of those who came to the gallery, all the farmers from every corner of the country here tonight to listen to this debate and to pay attention to it. And of course, when the gallery is full, we often hear people play to the gallery, and we have plenty of play actors in here you'd have experienced tonight. But we are here on serious business, and the serious business is about the Mercosur trade deal. And at the moment we have a situation where we have a number of countries, and as was said by Deputy Fitzmaurice, the committee spoke with the Polish Agriculture Committee this evening. We're also speaking with the French Agriculture Committee and with a number of others. And we need to build alliances with other countries who are of a like mind. And we are hearing back on the grapevine that the Irish government is not doing that to the level that it needs to do it. We are also hearing back that they will come in here and they will tell us one story, but when the officials go out to Europe, it is a different story that they are putting to the Commission. And that needs to change. And that is the reality. And people can deny that as much as they like, but we see it in the text of the Minister's speech. When we look through it, we see what it says. It says we are concerned about the Mercosur trade deal. We are looking at the text. It is all very vague and irresponsible. We have to take this seriously, and the only way we can take this seriously is for all of us to work together. We welcome the government didn't oppose our motion tonight, but we fear that they are not going to oppose Mercosur with the heartfelt commitment that they need to do so to win this battle on behalf of the farmers in the gallery and the thousands of farmers around the country and the hundreds of thousands of consumers in Europe that need this deal to be blocked. And that is why we are here tonight. We are here to ensure that this government is held to account. Minister Harkin said that it was in the programme for government. The programme for government is no good if it doesn't deliver. And the only way it will deliver is if the minister, and we have a new minister now with a competency for trade, Minister McEntee, who will have to go out and work on this deal. And we want to ensure, and one of the things I would ask for is that we would meet the minister, and certainly I would like to meet Minister McEntee in the coming week to put it to her that we need to deliver on this.
Thank you.
All of us.
And the question is that the motion, deputies, you know that is not standard practice.